So what I am saying now is, now since you have this relation x cube mod pi is equal to 1, calculate all the candidates for x. That you can do because pi is very small. It could at maximum be 43. So for every pi, you will get a set of candidates. That's all right. Now consider all combination of those candidates. Once you consider all combination of those candidates, so you will have what is x mod pi. You will get a tuple out of it, right? So, and as we stated in Chinese remainder theorem, there is a unique mapping of every tuple to a number between 1 and x. So every tuple would correspond to one solution, one unique solution. So you can find that using Chinese remainder theorem, that number, and you can add that to your answer. You could keep adding that for all the possible tuples. It turns out that there are only 9 to 27. There are about 800 solutions possible. So you can sum that up. You'll get the answer for this. This is one of the problems on site Project Euler. It's a good site for number theory problems, and the interested candidates could go and try it out once. So I'm assuming that you did understand the fact that if x cube mod x was equal to 1, then x cube mod pi will also be equal to 1 for every I, since x is product of pi. If this happens, let's say we just consider this equation. We want to find out what could be the possible values for small x mod pi. If we want to do that, small x mod pi could take values from 0 to pi minus 1. Is this fine? So since x mod pi can take this values, so we can try out each of these values and check if this value whole cube gives a remainder 1 with pi. So what we do basically is, we take a loop 1 to pi minus 1. If x cube mod pi is 1, we add this x candidate dot append x. So this way we will get a set of candidates for every pi, which is we'll get a set of candidates for x mod pi. So we'll get a set of values which x mod pi can take. Once we have that, so let's say x mod 2 could take 3 values. X mod 5 could take 3 values, 2, 3, 4, and x mod 7 could take 2 values, 3 and 4. We consider all 6 possibilities, pairing these two up, pairing these two up, this, all 6 possibilities, and all those possibilities would give us a tuple of x mod pi's. For every tuple we will get a solution from Chinese remainder theorem, and we will add that solution to our answer, which is what is required in the question. Okay, moving on to the next topic. You guys are aware what a prime number is. We have been discussing that for a while now. So how do you check if a number is prime? Okay, one of you has got to know how to check if a number is prime.
From 2 to the square root of the number, check if it's
okay, thankfully. So what you do is, you take a loop from 2 to square root of that number. You check if at all you find if any of the numbers is divisor of the number which we are checking, then the number is certainly not prime. It is composite because we have found a factor. If there is no such factor, the number is prime. Okay, so that is square root of n solution. It's a nice solution. What we will do is that, let's say you face a problem that you're given a very large number. Let's say the number is about 10 power 10, 10 power 11 or 10 power 12, and now you need to check if that number is prime. So for Java coders, actually there is a function by name of isProbablePrime. You can directly use that. For rest of the coders, that is C and C++ users, I'll detail out two methods which are actually used in that particular function. It's good to even know that. So you guys know what Fermat's theorem is? We just discussed it. Yeah. So a power p minus 1 is a power p minus 1 is 1 mod p. Right? This equation holds for prime numbers. It may or it may not hold for a composite number. So what we do is we take some random set of a's, and for every a we try to find out what is a power, let's say we are checking p for primality, what is a power p minus 1 mod p. If we get any of a where a power p minus 1 mod p is not equal to 1, that means that the number is not prime. It's certainly a composite number. You have to, however, keep in mind that a is not multiple of p. If we find any a such that this equation does not hold, that means our p is certainly not prime. However, if for all the bases a that we have considered, we encountered this relation, then this would mean that the number p is probably prime. We cannot say for sure that the number is still prime. That's why these tests are called probabilistic primality tests, and that is why the name of the function is probable prime, not is prime. Okay. Fermat's tests are the probability that Fermat's test will give you a right result is comparatively low. So that's why we move on to Miller-Robbins test. The probability for correctness of this test is a lot higher than Fermat's test. So the key idea being that first of all, the Fermat's theorem, again the same thing, this theorem, a power p minus 1 is 1 mod p, and that if x square is congruent to 1 mod p, then x is either 1 mod p or minus 1 mod p. Why is this so? This would mean that x square minus 1 is divisible by p, so is equal to k times p, let's say. So x minus 1 into x plus 1 is equal to k times p. As long as p is not equal to 2, these two would have no other GCD. The highest GCD that x minus 1 and x plus 1 could have is 2. So since let's say that the GCD is not 2, then these two numbers are co-prime. So you're multiplying two co-prime numbers and you're getting a multiple of p. If p is prime, then it's either got to divide x minus 1 or x plus 1. It cannot divide both. If p is not equal to 2, then the difference between any two multiples of p would be at least p, right? And p is not 2. So it will either divide x minus 1 or it will divide x plus 1. If it divides x minus 1, then x is equal to 1 mod p. If it divides x plus 1, then x is equal to minus 1 mod p. This is what we stated, right? This part is clear, right? If not, then please tell me. Okay, assuming that it is. So we see that if we have, let's say, 8 power 2x as 1 mod p, then 8 power x would be either 1 mod p or minus 1 mod p. One of these two. This is what we stated right now. We are halving the power, right? So the basic idea for Miller-Rabin test is that if we consider a power p minus 1 mod p, if it is not equal to 1, then we already are done, that this p number is not prime. Let's say it is equal to 1 and p minus 1 is, let's say, 2 power s into d. We just factorize it. I mean, we just took out the power of 2 out from p minus 1. So let's say it is equal to 2 power s into d. So we can write I'll write it down here once more. Now if we half the power, that is, we should either get 1 or minus 1. If we get anything else, we are sure that this number is certainly not prime. So this is the basic idea. We keep on halving the power as long as we have the power as 1, meaning the mod as 1. The moment it changes from 1, it could either go to minus 1 or 1. If it goes to any other number, then it's not prime. Or we do this as long as we are left with a positive power of 2. Okay? So this is the basic idea of Miller-Rabin test. There are various implementation methods. We could implement it in a suitable way for you. This is one pseudocode of implementation. We will share these slides with you, so if you want, you can use this implementation. In fact, this implementation is also available on Wikipedia. You can go and have a look there as well. There is a code available for this primality test on top coded algorithm tutorial. It was written by Ajay Somani. Move to the next slide. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
What happens when it is minus 1 mod p?
Then we stop. We stop and then we check for some other A. Some other base A.
Okay.
So we don't do it just once, we do it multiple times for different A's. For if this test fails for any of A's, you could choose it randomly, you could choose it, you can put a loop, it depends on you. So as soon as this mod becomes equal to minus 1, we stop. And then we move on to a different A. Okay, now approaching a different problem. This is a problem of factorizing an integer. Again, I hope you already know what is a square root solution. Anyone? No, anyone would volunteer? Yeah.
Look at all the primes until square root n and keep dividing them until the highest powers of each prime, and then you'll have a remaining number.
Okay.
If the remaining number is 1, then this is your factorization. Otherwise, that should be a prime.
Yeah.
Look at all primes until square root n and keep dividing them and find the highest power of each prime,
Okay.
and you will be left with a number.
Okay.
If that number is 1, you have the prime factorization.
Okay.
Otherwise, you just include the remaining number to your prime factorization, because that should also be a prime.
Okay. What he said is correct. You can do one optimization. You can skip calculating all primes. You can in fact have a direct loop from 2 to square root of n, and you can keep, let's say if this is a loop for I, you can keep dividing n by I as long as it's divisible. You won't need to take care of the prime thing, because you would have already taken out all the powers of prime from the n before you move on to the next prime, or before you move on to the next number. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that you take out all powers of 2 from n, then you won't have to check this from, meaning it would anyhow will not be divisible from 4 or 8 or 16. So So that way you would actually be doing the same thing which he said. You can do it